going to have a review of the, well, you can read this, the history of the CPA. A big one is our budget, and you'll see why we'll be. I've been getting lots of questions about, what monies we have available for different projects. So that's in here. And then at the end, we're going to wrap it up with, I'm going to go through the whole presentation. So hold your questions, and then at the end you can ask questions about that presentation. We'll go back to a slide if you have a specific question, and then after that we're going to have a discussion on any ideas or things you want to see CPA funds used for in the future. So first I want to talk about who's on the Community Preservation Committee. I'm Freddie Gillespie. I represent the Open Space Preservation Commission. Andrew Mills, why don't you stand up and let them say hi.
Hello.
He's the vice chair, and he's from the planning board. We have Joe Hubley. He's
Hello.
the chairman of the Historic Commission. Mark Murphy,
Hi, how are you?
Recreation Commission. Chris Molinaro's here tonight.
Hi,
He's
everyone.
on Conservation Commission. Tim Martell.
Hi.
He's our newest at-large member. And as you can see, we have 3 positions that are open. 2 of them have designated seats. It means you must be a member of that organization. One is the Southborough Housing Authority. The other one is the Southborough Housing Opportunity PC. I don't know, I'm sorry. Anyhow, that committee, SHOPC, did I write it backwards maybe? Anyhow, SHOPC, I believe, is still looking for members, so if anyone's interested in affordable housing and working with the town, you can contact the selectmen about getting on that, and we're hoping to get a representative from them. And we have another at-large member opening, and if anyone's interested in that, I recommend you come to a few of our meetings to see what we do, particularly the at-large members who don't have another board that they sit on. We are looking for them to help out and roll up their sleeves a lot, because we do have a pretty heavy workload on this committee. It's not like meeting once a month. And next one. So here's the history. Back in 2003, we passed a surcharge of 1%. And it's not a 1% tax, it's 1% of your tax after some exemptions. And I'll go over that a little bit later. And we started our first project that were approved at a special town meeting, which was the conservation restriction for Chestnut Hill Farm. We started off with a big bang, so that was a pretty big deal. Do you want to go? So this is about the Community Preservation Committee. So the CPA, and then there's the CPC. We're pretty much in charge of looking at all the needs of the town for all the areas of community preservation, which are community housing, which includes affordable housing, but it's not just affordable. It's community housing, as well as open space preservation, historic preservation. Recreation is another sub area of open space, but it doesn't have its own real category. When CPA first started out, it's gained a larger prominence in the Act over time. And to develop a 5-year master plan for the CPC. We have a CPA plan on our website, and I'm hoping people will go and visit that in the future. So, here's the question I've been getting, and these numbers are from the town assessors, just hot off the press. So the average single-family home is assessed at $557 in Southborough. We have an exemption. The first $100,000 is an exemption, so you subtract that. Then you take the tax rate and you multiply it by the price of the home's assessed value. And it turns out for the average home in Southborough, it's $73.25. You can do the same figures for your own home. Figure out what your assessed rate is, value is, and then subtract 100,000, multiply it, and then times 1%. So we also have an exemption for lower income, and it's a little, senior citizens have a little bit different price point for their exemption. One of the goals of the Community Preservation Act was not to hit hard the citizens that least can afford to pay for it. So So now we get into the buckets. The three categories of the CPA, open space, historic preservation, and community housing, each are required to get 10% of the annual budget into those, and we call them buckets. They go into accounts, actually. We're not throwing money in buckets, but we refer to them as the buckets. Administration for the Community Preservation Committee for our needs can be 5%, and then the remainder goes into the undesignated reserve. And if you notice the note at the bottom, that is, recreation doesn't have a bucket of its own. It comes out of the undesignated reserve or general unreserved. So next slide. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is last year's budget, and this sort of talks about what the Community Preservation Committee does. We have to get estimates based on the best information available. The surcharge we get from the town treasurer, and he gives us his estimate of what next year's receipts are going to be. So last year, around this time of year, we were budgeting for 2014's annual town meeting. And the number he came up with was 287. Then we had to decide on a match amount, and that's based on against the prior year's receipts, not the 287, but what we got the prior year. This is confusing, I'll just whip through it because it'll be more obvious in a minute. And we have to talk with the Department of Revenue, gives some guidance, and the Community Preservation Coalition gives guidance. However, that guidance comes out in March, and we have to have our warrant articles in like next week. So we really do the best we can. And then the following year, there's often an adjustment, so we can, you know, if it's off a little bit, it's not important to make the adjustment because the money goes into the accounts. But if it's a large amount, we need to make an adjustment because we want to make sure each of the buckets get their fair share of the 10%. But it's not like whatever we don't put in there doesn't end up in the bucket. It does, because that's why our treasurer and accountant have jobs. And they have to, as they assured me, they wouldn't have those jobs if they didn't report accurately to the Department of Revenue. So when you put money in the buckets, if you don't spend it, it stays in the bucket and you keep adding to it, unlike normal municipal budgets, which, you know, at the end of the fiscal year zeroes out. So right now, the open space has 0 because every year we spend whatever goes into that on the Chestnut Hill Farm bond. Community housing's been gaining funds. Historic has also been acquiring money that hasn't been spent. Then we have these two bottom buckets, which is where there's some confusion. They both can be used for the same projects. It's just budgeted reserve is what's in the annual estimated budget that doesn't go into a bucket. We put it into a budgeted reserve so that if we needed to use it, we can. Because the tax laws are such that there's a wait before you can use the money if you don't say what you're using it for at annual town meeting. And then at the end of that fiscal year, any money from the budgeted reserve that we didn't use, if we didn't need to use it, gets dropped into the general unreserved. So the budgeted reserve is basically a holding spot for the general unreserved so that we have access to it. So if perchance there was a special town meeting this winter, if we hadn't put that money in the budgeted reserve, which was saying we might use it, we wouldn't have access to it until after the fiscal year on July 1st. And that might be too much information, so if you got it, that's great, but just know that for any projects, you can add the 327 and the 409 together, and that's how much is available, say, for recreation that doesn't have a bucket. For the total is 735-ish. So that amount plus the 121 is available for community housing, or the two together plus the 148 is what would be available for a historic project. So we have these different buckets, which you have to pay attention to them, but when you work with them a lot, it becomes easier to. So this is about there's a lot of misinformation about the state match been going around. Did everyone get a handout on what we've collected? It's on the table over there. So since we started CPA, yeah, you did. Was it on the table? Oh, sorry. That might not be it. I mean, that's it. I don't know what she's passing. Oh, that's she's passing.
Well, that's good too. That's the different categories.
Oh, okay. All these handouts are wonderful. I've worked on them myself, and I can give them high ratings. So, this handout here talks about, this is reported from the Department of Revenue, how much we've gotten every year from the state match, but it also shows how much our local surcharge was. And if you're looking at the chart, which I'm sorry I couldn't get it onto the PowerPoint, you'll notice in the first year, the surcharge was $188,000, but we didn't get a state match, because the state match is a year behind. It's always matching the prior year. So in the next year, you'll notice that the 188 matches it exactly. Because in the first 4 years, we received 100% match on every dollar we put into the surcharge. But that was never a promise. You know, we got in early, and how the match is made is there's a state trust fund, and it's funded by, I believe it's a $20 fee on every deed that's recorded at the Registry of Deeds across the state. So in years when the housing market's booming, or when people are refinancing a lot because the mortgage rates, the interest rates are good, and there's a lot of activity, a lot of $20 are going into the state trust fund. So it's building up. If you have a down year in the markets, less money's going in, so there's less money to match. The other side of that is more communities have been signing up for CPA. So there's more dollars being drawn out that need to be matched. So when we signed up for the Community Preservation Act, what we were promised is we get our fair share of a match from that trust fund. And we always have. We've gotten our fair share. The first years, because there weren't as many communities drawing against it, and there was a lot of money in the trust fund, we got 100% every year. Then it started dropping down, and eventually it went down to around 26%, 27%, at which time the Community Preservation Coalition, which is an organization that works with many of the different partners for CPA, but also with the state legislature, they worked hard to try to see how they could boost up the funds, and they're actually trying to find stable funding mechanism that will keep the match at around 75%. They haven't been successful, but in the past 2 years, they have gotten some other surplus. I don't know that there's ever surplus money, so some money from the state budget that at the end of the budgeting season, if they had some there, they would put it into the Community Preservation Fund, the trust fund. The year before they put in $25 million to help with the match, and this year we only got $11 million put in. But that raised the total amount of the trust fund, which increased our match from what we thought we were getting based on just the $20 that went in. So this past year, we received a 31.5% match. So talking about if it's a good value still to have the Community Preservation Act, for your $72.25, I believe it is, for the average home, you're getting a 31.5% match. And I know if the bank down the street was offering a 30% interest or more, we'd all be running down there to sign up, right? So this here shows you on the slide, and I'm off the handout, that overall we've collected a total of over $4 million, but over $1.5 million of that has been from a state match. And this is money that doesn't come with the state strings attached. We have to spend it on one of the categories of the Community Preservation Act, but how we spend it is totally locally determined. You have a Community Preservation Committee that reviews applications, and then it goes If we recommend it, it goes to town meeting and the citizens vote on it. So it's a pretty, I think it's a pretty good deal. So here are some examples of our approved projects. We've had a pretty good cross-section of some housing, recreation, open space, and historic preservation. Not every project does everybody like, but enough people liked it to pass it at town meeting. So some people might say, oh, I didn't like this one, and somebody else might say, oh, I didn't like that one. But overall, there's been real community support for the projects we've come up with. Okay. So here's about the application process. We have a website, and if you go on the website, you can understand what the act's about. A good thing to also get a feel for is if your project qualifies. Then we take our applications in June. We'll be having another one of these meetings before that application round. But we're going to be working between now and then on trying to get more input from citizens across the town to let us know what they think the needs of community preservation are for Southborough, as well as we're going to try to work harder with the different boards and committees that could supply us with information so that we have a plan that has real concrete ideas. And you don't always know, like for open space, you don't know what property might be coming down the road, but we can do some better planning. Just like with the historical, if we were planning well, we might know what projects and what properties we might want to be protecting next year, in 5 years, you know, even long-term in 10 years. A Community Preservation Committee 5-year plan is sort of like a capital budget plan. So we're going to try to be working on that a little bit. Again, rolling up our sleeves and working hard at that. Then we also recommend a town meeting, and you've been, I think all of you have been at town meeting and voted on a project. And we have to be ready to answer project-related questions. The project proponent, the Community Preservation Committee recommends, but the person on town meeting floor that has to answer the questions is the group or the advocacy group that filled out the application. Did I just stumble on my words there a little bit, everyone? Did you get it? Did you out there? Okay. Wasn't prepared for. So here's just some pictures of some of the recreation projects we've done. This is a volleyball field. This is a recreation playground. So, are there any questions on what we just went over? Did I lose you on any of the budgeting, or?
You want to talk about this at all? The different boxes?
Sure.
You can hand
Does
out.
everyone have the?
I had a question, just
Okay.
on the projects that have been done, as you budgeted for that, is there part of it that's like continued, repair and maintenance of those items, those places? How is that?
That's a good question. We can't. CPA is not allowed to fund maintenance, ongoing maintenance. Because one of the things, they didn't want towns using the CPA Act to supplement the regular municipal budget. So it specifically does not allow it, and if we have a new project, one of the questions on our application is, what do you anticipate the ongoing funds needed to keep this up? Who's going to do it? Where's that money going to come from? And it's certainly, you also have to appear in front of advisory if you have a project, and it's certainly something they want to know, because they don't want us funding grandiose schemes that's going to cost more money than the town can afford to maintain.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the playground, the picture of the South Union School playground. There's some kind of, maintenance associated with that or upkeep with that, right? And that's turned over to the town. Is that how that works?
Well, that playground is owned by the town, It's on town property. And then the town does assume, like any playground, the benefit with that one, it costs a lot less money because of the CPA money, plus the match, plus Recreation got additional funds to help build it. So that was a really, I was just talking to Doreen about that, how much use it gets. It's one of those playgrounds where you might drive by and say no one's there, but it's sort of very like no one's there, or after nap time everyone's there. It depends on the time of day. They do get quite a bit of use there. Some of the daycares in the neighborhood bring children there, but it is one of those, like many of the playgrounds, if you go to down by Bay.
I'm just trying to figure out post the initial, the initial, restoration or preservation, how that continues on. That's all I was trying to figure
Yeah.
out.
And then-
It's turned over to the town, or some of the body is turned over to it, sounds like.
Yeah, well, most of the projects, I mean, like, think of the Triangle Park. When that project was coming through, Karen Gallagher was part of it, so she knew we had price estimates of what the mowing was going to be, the upkeep of trees and everything else, and that she was involved so that that was going to happen, and it wasn't just, oh, we're going to put this in place and then it's going to get overgrown in 2 years, but it's going to be part of the overall town. So I think that is what you're looking
Yeah.
Any other questions before we go to this chart? So this chart is something that the Community Preservation Committee uses when they look at a project. Is it fundable? Can we fund it with CPA funds? There are things that you might think you can, and then you find out if it doesn't fit in here, you can't. So not all projects, just because it's a recreation project, can be funded with CPA monies. For example, there's a specific language in the Act that says you can't fund a stadium. So,
A stadium?
a stadium. Because the recreation, which was more to be about passive recreation, they did try to keep it in that area of passive recreation, so a stadium wasn't really what they had in mind. You couldn't build, something with bleachers, that kind of a football stadium. But I'm saying stadium, I'm not saying you can't use it for fields. But there's certain criteria. So if you're looking at the chart, you go across and it will tell you, like if you're doing open space, can you buy open space? Yes. Can you create open space? Yes. But you can't create next to that on the block, you can't create historic resources, because you can't create new history. So you can protect and preserve history, but and then as recreation has gained a bigger stance, you see that it has yeses across the bottom in the chart for rehabilitation and restoration. Recreation is a yes there. So that's something new that they didn't, if they changed the legislation, they didn't used to let you do some of the things. So, like any legislation, it evolves, and our committee tries to stay on top of it. We pay funds, we pay dues to the Community Preservation Coalition that supply wonderful technical advice to us. They give us newsletters. In addition to advocating at the legislature to keep the state match there, they work with committees. You can call them up as a dues-paying committee and get the benefit of their their technical advice. Is that it on the presentation? Go ahead, Jim.
Right. I counted 18 times tonight you used the term recreation. So it got me thinking here, if there's only 3 buckets and recreation isn't a bucket, if this chart has 4,
Correct.
is it 3 by state law?
This is the legislation of the CPA, did not create a bucket for
Okay.
recreation. What happened was, recreation was sort of originally a subset of open space, but recreation couldn't use anything in the open space reserve bucket. It had to come out of the general unreserved, and it still does. It doesn't have a bucket, but it has a secure place within community preservation. Act funds. And one of the things that happened is originally towns that were more suburban or rural were signing up for it, and there was more of a need to protect open space. But to entice cities that don't really have a huge need or availability of open space parcels, they wanted to use it for more recreation. And so they molded the act to try to meet those needs, to encourage some of the cities to come on. And that's another thing, when a big city comes on, their portion of the match is huge compared to Southborough, because their tax revenue on the even 1% would be a lot larger dollar amount than certainly we would have to.
Thank you.
Freddie, with the definition of preservation versus like a maintenance item. So, as one example, let's say we had an historic building in town that had a leaky roof because it needed to be re-shingled. Would that be classified as a maintenance item, or could that be classified as preservation?
It depends. It depends on what else needs to be done to the building. One thing we don't like to see is delayed maintenance, because then it becomes restoration. So there's things, depending on the project, if it was part of a bigger restoration project and there were other needs for the building, I think it could be. But if it was just to repair a roof, it may not be. And I'm sorry I can't be more definite, but that's where the knowledge and the value of the Community Preservation Committee comes in. Because, those are the types of things we discuss. Did you want to say something to that, Andrew?
Yeah, and you mentioned roofs, and I was recently with the facilities manager looking at other projects that were funded across the state. And there have been a lot of projects specifically for roofs that have to do with historic preservation for certain buildings across the state. But I agree with Freddie. I think, when the act was created to really preserve and not to do quote maintenance. So I think if you're thinking of if it's a part of a larger restoration where, say, maybe the townhouse needs to have the roof redone, the front doors redone, the walkway repointing, and it's going to be a broader restoration of the building compared to, oh no, we're just going to repoint the outside of the building. I think there's some interpretation of that, my view, but and a lot of the times too, we go to the Coalition of Boston and we run by with them pretty much all the projects that we are thinking of putting before a town meeting as well, to say, does this meet the act? Is this, we feel confident this is correct, but we'll run it by you, and they review all the projects as well. So, and they're also open for if residents wanted to call or anything. But if you go to their website too, you can see everything by town, and even do a search just on roofs alone or whatever it is, to say, hey, has anyone done this? Now, just because some other towns have funded a project doesn't mean it should have been funded either, because there was one, we had an application once for something that another town did, where a department was looking for a piece of equipment. It was like, okay, no, you can't do it even though another town did that.
If you go to the Community Preservation Coalition's website, it's a great resource. Our website's pretty good too, but the database of all the projects that is on the Coalition's website, before you can get into the website, there's a warning that you have to agree you read, which is, just because it's there doesn't mean you can do it too, nor should anyone use that as a reason that you should fund one of their projects, and an applicant shouldn't use that as a reason to the committee. And one of the things that's happened is, it's self-reporting, first of all, and especially in the early years of the Community Preservation Act, there's been a lot of review since then by the Department of Revenue, keep stumbling on that word, the Department of Revenue, which is, because this is a tax, they're the ones who are ultimately in charge of it, and they issue these informational, documents for you to, sort of like almost a legal opinion on what you can and can't do. And what has happened in the early years, there was a lot of what we called gray areas nobody really knew for sure, could you, couldn't you, it hadn't been really defined. So there were a lot of projects that were done. And then people in other towns might not have the same knowledge that a different town has about what's allowed or not allowed. And so you never want to rely on what's in there. It gives you ideas, but never rely on it, and never come to our committee and say, oh, you know, Chelmsford, I don't even know if they have CPA, but, you know, not picking on them, but, you know, such and such a town did this, so you can too. You know, we do our best to research whether it's an allowed use, whether, and not only is it an allowed use, but is it something that we feel, because we have another responsibility, which is looking at all the needs in Southborough for all the different areas of community preservation and how it fits and measures up against the available funds for that year, and also for other projects that might be coming up or are on the, have been applied for in that given year. Any other on this? Okay, if you want to go to the next slide.
Excuse me, Freddie, just one question.
You may.
Does the DOR then go after the town meetings have voted to expend the monies? Does DOR then review those to ensure that they're in compliance with the law?
Actually, no. At this point in time, there are no CPA police. However, if you're not in compliance and you pass a project, first of all, I would hope that our Community Preservation Committee would never recommend one we knowingly knew wasn't meeting the criteria. So we wouldn't do it knowingly. Could we do it by mistake in the past? Yes, I think we're a lot more knowledgeable and it'd be much less likely to happen, but it can. And if it did, DOR doesn't come after you, but you're leaving yourself open to a lawsuit, because any citizen that maybe didn't like it and looks into it and says, well, that wasn't allowed, they can sue. And I believe the city of Newton had a very large legal case on whether turf fields were allowed. And eventually that law came out, and the CPA Act was actually, I don't know if they actually wrote it into the act, but changes were made where you can't fund a turf field, artificial turf, excuse me, but you can fund other components of the field. But never ever if it's in a stadium. So, I mean, there are all these little tricky things. Does that answer that question? I was about the next slide. Oh, this is the next slide. So we're here to, sorry, I'm so silly. We're here to, do you have any ideas? I mean, I know so many of you are here about the Burnett Garfield House, and, or have an interest in that. Maybe not be why you're here, but I would say for that, you know, we already, the CPC already knows about that. So that's not really a project we're looking for your input on tonight, but you're welcome to, you know, say something about it. But our role for that project will be, once there's an application, we'll get it and we'll review it, and then we will recommend it to town meeting, and then it will be, if we approve it. I missed a step there. If we approve the application, we will recommend it to town meeting, and then the voters get to vote. But at that point, it would be up to the applicant to do the promotion on the project. Our committee does not advocate for the individual projects at town meeting. We bring them forth and then we turn it over to the applicant, who should know way more than we do about all the details. So they're also required to meet with the advisory committee we go with them, but to explain the project and answer questions, as well as then to go in front of the selectmen. And then at town meeting, they have a role there as well. And certainly other advocacy groups can advocate for projects. So, I was just curious if anyone, did you get the sheet that tells you to fill it out, and you can either pass it in or email it to us if you have ideas. This is going to be ongoing. Like I said, our next round starts in June. We'll have another one of these forums, and before that we want to have an idea of all the community preservation needs in Southborough in the near future, and even looking long-term, what they are. But right now, is there anything that comes to mind that anyone wanted to mention?
I have a question,
Okay.
which I maybe should know. How many more years will be paying for the Chestnut Hill Farm?
The Chestnut Hill Farm bond, which, it's a bond, and the rules for bonding is the bond can only be bonded against your surcharge. And it makes sense because you never know how much the state match is going to be, so you can't commit to it. You can only commit against what's available, so you can't commit all of your surcharge because you still have to fund the other categories like historical and the housing, which is why on that slide you saw that those other two had balances, but the open space was zeroed out. So we have, did I answer your question? We have 2 more years?
No.
Maybe I didn't get there. We have 2 more years, and so right now, mostly what we've had to spend, because that was a major project, and we spent about 75% of our surcharge on it. All we had left to spend on other projects were what was in the bucket, so what was in the bucket for historical, and then what was in the general unreserved, mostly coming from, well, actually all of it coming from the state match. And in the early years, it was okay because we had, you know, lots of state match. So we've had a little bit of less overall revenue available for projects lately, but we also haven't had a lot of projects coming in. You know, they've been small, and that's another reason we want to do more outreach and get better ideas and do planning. Because there's nothing wrong with not spending money in a year, but you want to be sure it's not because nobody's thinking about it or we're not planning. And there's nothing wrong with, even if a project came in, to say we're not going to fund it this year because next year we know there's a big one coming up. But you need to have that knowledge, which is what we need you here in the room and everyone at home that's watching this to actually provide us information. Because it's not just what our committee thinks should be done. We go out and we reach out to the, you know, certainly the people on the committee, to their commissions and boards that they represent. But also, you know, we contact the town. We always contact like facilities. What are the town's needs that might fit into this? Andrew mentioned the townhouse, it's a historic building. Are there needs? We have spent money on other town buildings for historic preservation, but it has to be for historic preservation. You know, you can't always just like spend money on a historic building if it doesn't meet the criteria of preservation for the CPA's needs.
That was my question, because the townhouse is a good example. It is a historic building, it was built in 1870. Now let's suppose that somebody wanted to do something controversial, like take all the historic windows out and replace them with other windows that were not historic. Would that come in, would you make a judgment on that? Or?
That's not our role. Our role is to look at projects that are presented to us and to look at the needs across the town. Like, we could say in our plan, say that we were thinking of spending money for preservation of a project on the townhouse. But if the town didn't put that project to us, it's, you know, that's somebody else's decision. I would imagine the Historic Commission would have a role there. And then the citizens of the town would have a role. But for this committee, we basically, you know, an application comes to us and then we see if it fits our needs or not. I mean, not our needs, but the needs of the town, and then if it actually is an allowable use.
Thank you.
Yeah, but do you have to disperse a certain amount of money per year, or?
No. All we have to do by requirement is put the 10% in the buckets that need the 10%, and then write out a warrant article to do that so that money gets put in those buckets. That's really the only, am I mistaken, Andrew? The only requirement we have to do.
Yeah, and once it's in that bucket though, so like the 10% set-asides that happen for each one, and it stays in there until a project comes up for that. So that's why you see like the historic And the affordable housing, they have over $100,000 each. So, our open space, we've been taking the set-aside money every year and putting it to Chestnut Hill Farm. So that's how those have built up. So when you say when we have to disperse, you could interpret that as we set the money aside. Yes. Does it actually get used for something every year? Well, like Freddie said, not necessarily, depending on the projects that come forth. And in some cases, some of the projects cut across multiple buckets, where you could have a combination of creating open space and historic preservation at the same time. And you could use for multiple buckets. So, part of what we see, or I can say, as a member of the CPC, I see part of our responsibility is looking at, okay, the total fund and making sure that it's sustainable, for the future as well. So one thing we do look at for when the projects come in, or at least that I look at when projects come in, to say, okay, well, what is this going to do to the total funds that we have in here, or like Freddie said, potential projects that are going to come in the future. I would say we've been very conservative in the past for what we have been budgeting for the state match, assuming that, who knows what's really going to happen. Luckily, we have been conservative, and most of the time the match has been in excess of what we budgeted for, which is a great problem to have. So that's the way we have approached it in the past.
Well, can you go back one to, okay. Can you see where it says, I brought my little pointer, it was my kitty toy that broke. Can you see where it says projected state match, 71,000? I maybe didn't need to use that, I just wanted to. 71,000, if you look on your sheet, under fiscal year 2015, we just received that state match recently, in November, and it was 87,000. That was the bump that the state legislature, approved some money from the funding. So this year we'll be taking, what's that, around 17,000?
So, how come-
16,000 as an adjustment. Because when we budgeted a year ago, we didn't know that, but like Andrew said, we always try to be conservative, but reasonable. And then that money's there because it already came in and we haven't finished getting the local surcharge yet. So this is how it's reported to Department of Revenue. The town doesn't report their surcharge until the end of the fiscal year, so next September. Okay, Kate?
I wondered just why there's such a, 70,000 roughly in 2013, double that in 2014, and then you're going back. Why was there a bump in 2014?
Well, see, it started at 100% on this chart,
Yeah.
early years. Then gradually, as more towns, and especially if a city joined up, the match started going down.
Yeah.
The Community Preservation Coalition worked really hard, and last year they got a $25 million bump into the account.
Right.
This year they tried. They were supposed to get 25 million, but turns out the state only had 11 million to give them. Plus, additional towns had signed on, so there were more funds that needed to be matched, more towns that were drawing from it. So that it went from 52% match to 31%. That's the difference. But you notice the surcharge always goes up because we always know some things don't go down, and that's taxes usually. So.
I'm trying to understand how you decide whether a project is within the, let's say, fundable budget. Is it based upon the amount of money that's in the bucket at any one time? Because you're talking about, I'm new to the area, I don't understand what happened at Chestnut Hill Farm, I'm trying to understand. There's a bond taken out, so you're paying off down the road. But how is the initial amount of what you believe we could fund, whether it be $500,000 or $100,000? How do you initially establish that this is a fundable amount and then create a bond, or you take out a bond on that? how you pay that off. Feel free to take it offline if this is too complicated.
Well, I think people are interested, so I'll try. Somebody told me to keep it simple, but everywhere I go, people are asking me these questions about the funds. So I think it's worth trying to explain it to intelligent people in the room, so I will. If you look at this chart again, in our first year, 2004, we had 188, and then it went up to 202 for the surcharge. At that time, our committee looked at what we thought we were going to get at the surcharge. We took 75% of it. We came up with a number that was $150,000 that we thought we could pay. 75% is because we had to save 10% for historic, 10% for community housing, and 5% for the admin. You subtract that from what the 100% of our surcharge, we thought we could bond 75%. So we came up with 150. We worked with town treasurer and we said, how much money can we borrow for $150,000 a year payment for 20 years?
It's 20.
It's not, but that's another story.
This is what I'm trying to understand, the long term. I mean, it's not just, because you're not paying.
We'd write the warrant article
You're not-
different now if that came up, but.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure the difference between paying 75% of what's the fund, paying cash essentially, that's the year what you spent, versus a longer term.
You know, I mean,
fund.
for the bonding, we've only bonded one, which was Chestnut. That was a big ticket item. And like Freddie said, you can only bond X amount across what we take in for the surcharge anyhow. So I don't know if we're completely maxed out on that or not, but so we're pretty much tapped for the bonding, I believe.
There's a little bit extra left now because in the final years, the payment's gone down. So we have a little bit of money between 75% and what the bond payment's at, about 200,000, a little bit less.
But
And
at the time, we maxed out the bond, so that we could only do one bond. But now that that's tapering off, that'll become available again for the future.
Can I ask what was the total bill? I wasn't here.
Oh, for
What was
those,
the total amount of the Chestnut Hill?
you know, I don't have the exact number, so I don't want to, I could roughly say totally there was over 5 million.
Okay.
And some of it was CPA, some the town paid out of another account. There was a lot of private fundraising that happened. We got $500,000 from the state, from a grant from the state. But there was, I think it was like $700,000 or $800,000 in private funds that were raised by some of the very people in this room. The Southborough Open Land Foundation was very hardworking to make sure that happened, working with the Sudbury Valley trustees. So this was a huge, long-term, several-year effort between many organizations in the town and regional that worked on this. So what happens here, if you're looking at this budget though, first we figure out how much we're going to have, which is, this was for last year, we estimated 358. Then we put it in the buckets, and then we just want to make sure that when we're all done, the buckets match how much we thought, so that's the total at the bottom. And then you take the money in those buckets and they go into, if you just move the slide. And they would end up, right now this shows that money has been moved in there. Also what happened at last town meeting, we funded the Chestnut Hill Farm bond. So we took everything out of open space to fund the bond, plus some money out of the general unreserved. And this is what's left in the accounts. That's one other thing to what you said, Rose. We are obligated to pay the bond. But we have to every year vote, and we have to put a warrant article on because you can't do that ahead of time. It has to be done every year. It's not like you can put money aside and say, oh, this will go for it in an account. Every year we have to authorize that payment.
Freddie, what's the interest rate on the Chestnut Hill Farm bond?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's more than interest rates are today. And for some reason I'm thinking 7%, but
Is it
I don't
fixed
know.
rate?
You'd have to ask the town treasurer. I mean, and then he puts that together. Yeah. At the time that he got the bond, he put it together in such a way to receive the best situation for the town. So whatever was done, and I don't know if he revises it in different years and moves stuff around. I mean, that's finance way beyond my 101 here in the room.
So yeah, so I guess the reason I was asking is that when you're looking for uses, proposals, you could be looking 10 years down the line. I mean, we're not looking at something that's necessarily short-term.
Our plan, correct, our plan should be, looking at what's coming up in 5 years and looking at what's coming up in 10 years. I think a town's good capital budget would know that they needed something, a school was going to be needed in 10 years. And they'd start planning ahead or be aware of it. So yes, we should know, I don't like saying should, we'd like to know. And if there's an opportunity that's coming up that's not available now, but it's going to be coming up in the future, to be more proactive. One of the things about, if we knew ahead of time the Garfield House, wouldn't we have done something different a few years ago when it was on the market? There could have been opportunities then that, if that were to come up today, if we were planning, I mean, right now, if we looked at all the needs in the town, and if the historical commission and the historical preservation folks are looking around town, and you can come up with what you think a need is and where you see, one of the things you might look at is what's vulnerable, what we might be faced with losing. And we also have to look at what the reality of protecting that is. So there are things like what's the threat, what's the reality, is it kind of protected? Like one thing I'm on the Open Space Preservation Commission, and one thing we know is a huge priority for the town is the St. Mark's Golf Course, if that were ever to be at risk. It's kind of, doesn't seem to be right now, but you don't want to think that it never will be. So it never gets, just because St. Mark's isn't looking to divest, thank you. How many wrong words have I said tonight?
Only one.
If St. Mark's is looking to divest it, we'd be more apt to be campaigning and gearing up. But right now, it doesn't seem that that's the case. So we keep it on our list, and we keep aware of it, but it's not a priority right now. The same thing happens for other properties in town for open space. If it's in an area that the town has identified that they would like to keep because it's commercial or industrial, and therefore it wouldn't be well suited for open space because the town would prefer to benefit from commercial or business taxes rather than having it go to open space. We would consider that, this is my commission, but we consider that when making our priorities, and so wouldn't this Community Preservation Committee when considering what the needs of the town are when people bring us a plan. But anything you write to us, if you pass in on that sheet or email us later, it's going to get on a list that we're going to consider, and hopefully we'll have a more directed forum or charrette in the future to get real, maybe have a professional who can really dig into what people's goals and needs are. And I said we were going to end this portion of our meeting at 8 because we're jam-packed tonight. So unless there's any other questions, I'd like to thank you for coming. I'd like to ask you to visit our website and please send emails. And did you sign in the sheet because we want to know who was here tonight? If you didn't sign in already, will you please sign in on your way out? Or you can hang around for the rest of the meeting if you're so inclined. So we're now starting the next agenda item, which is project update, All Wars Memorial by Peter Fanna.
Good evening. I don't think I know all of this.
We need to get those signs made up.
How you doing? I'm slowing down. Nice to meet you. Thank you. I'm Mark. See you.
project that was funded by a town meeting in 2007 for $25,000. The vast majority of it was constructed in the same year. There was one piece of unfinished business that I've been working on and have finally come to conclusion. Through the years, Andrew has been my liaison, and when I brought him the status of our budget, he mentioned to me that one of the criteria for a CPA project is that I assume at the end, or at some point in the process, there'd be a permanent marker at that site indicating that this work, particular work, was funded by the CP Community Preservation Act. If you look at what I just handed you, of the $25,000, all but $2,500 was spent on outside labor. The rest of it was donated labor and materials. I have the portion that's undone is, and it was part of the original presentation, is the engraving of the names, ranks, date of birth, date of death of the 32 veterans, Southborough veterans, who have died in the service of their country from Southborough since the American Revolution. If you would like to look at some idea of that, I've had to, through the years, pare it down. I had grandiose ideas of the information I was going to put on it, but the cost of engraving is not as gone up through the years. Once again, for familiarization, this is what the plan was, and it's pretty similar to the finished product. You have to share it. The stones, the rectangle, this set of square stones on the outside and on the inside. And actually, there's a round one in the center. You'll see it on one of them.
These here?
Huh?
These squares?
Oh, yeah, see, those are rectangles.
These squares would sit in this square here?
Right, they're
Gotcha.
made up of 4
Inlaid.
foot, they're 4 foot by 1 foot by 2 inches thick, and they're inlaid, they fit flush.
They're already there.
They're already there.
Right.
And they, matter of fact, one of the integrators said, I'll give you a better price if you want to pull them out and bring them to the shop. I've been here for 6 years now, so I tend to balk at that. So those squares, each one of the 1 foot by 4 foot sections, blocks, would have 2 names of the veteran. The intent is to do it in alphabetical order, starting at a point on the inside. The Americans the first from the American Revolution and the Civil War, and then First World War, Second World War, and Vietnam. There is space in the outer perimeter for, regrettably, future names should they occur. The space that's allocated here has room for expansion.
Which we hope aren't needed.
What's that?
Which we always hope aren't needed.
Right. Unfortunately, at the end of the First World War, we water in all wars. We've been very lucky. We've had a lot of veterans in the wars since Vietnam. Knock on wood, they've all come home. So I have high on that budget. You'll see there's an $8,000. $19 cost for the engraving to be done. in accordance with these sheets that I passed out. Essentially, we were the balance of us. I represent the veterans, by the way, of town of Southborough. And we took the American Legion Post and the VFW Post as a liaison on this project. One of the primary reasons I'm here tonight is that in the discussion with what it looked like to the fourth was the marking, the permanent marking required by CPA. My suggestion would be to have a piece of stone, probably approximately a foot square, that is the same material as this, with an engraving similar, or obviously it's your call, to what's on the third page of the handout, and that is that the memorial restoration was supported by the Community Preservation Act 2007. It would be at a location, I guess at your discretion. I prefer not to put it in the area where the veterans would have died. In other words, basically in the center. There's room on the backside was it all flags, any place at their discretion.
A little lower, like right about there,
On the stone.
behind the stone wall and this right there. As you enter in on the right, like a low post with a marker on top, so it's away from all the others. That's just my suggestion.
That could be done. It could be engraved in stone on the stone wall as well, but
Yeah?
I just thought it would, there's a discussion about brass plaques. Right? As many of you might be aware, there's been a lot of vandalism and stealing of brass and bronze plaques because of the value. And in fact, on the podium, there is the words from Flanders Field, and I was driving by someday and find that thing not there anymore. The idea of putting it in a stone and then setting it in the bricks probably makes it of no value in that respect. As Joe said, but anyway, there are flowers all around the periphery of this, so that might obstruct it. There's quite a bit of space in the back. I suppose you could put it on the sidewalk coming in. It depends on.
My thought in the back is no one's going to see it.
What's that?
No one's going to see it in the back.
Well, the first thing is, you're asking if it's okay to do the stone instead of the...
I'm just here to find out what you want as
Right.
far as I'm just putting my preference as a stone, because number one, it's in concert with what's already there. Like I say, the location doesn't have to be behind there. It can be right in the pathway. It can be off to the side. Elevating it presents a little problem. To be very frank with you.
And I spoke with Peter about this, and I think we'd all agree that there's no need to have the Community Preservation Committee's marker in any way detract from the soldiers and in any way.
Absolutely not.
So we certainly want to work. I would imagine my recommendation is that we work with you and we try to find something that we like that you have the ultimate yay or nay. You don't like where you can make some suggestions, and if we don't like it, okay, but we're not going to make you put it somewhere that you don't want it to be.
Well, I say it's, I'm a liaison for a group of people.
Right.
And obviously,
Where your
you were
groups.
the ones, this was money that was appropriated by your committee, so.
Well, did we start out by saying thank you for the wonderful job you did? I mean, I know how often I drove by and saw you out there working away at it.
It was an
And
honor, believe me.
the town owes you a debt.
It was my pleasure. Truly.
Absolutely amazing how nice this came out.
What about right here, where Joe was talking about, I get having it set in, that's sort of a threshold going into it? Would that be,
Well, normally we put anything identifying the CPA project would be somewhere where it's visible as you enter. So if this is the entrance, anywhere, even along Common Street, would, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, would suffice as long as, again, it doesn't impede
How about-
anything with the memorial,
Even off the side of
wherever,
benches,
anywhere,
something like
yep, anywhere. Doesn't it? As long as it's, I don't think you want it on, within this circle here. You want it outside of the, I even think you may want it outside of the wall. Because you don't want it to detract from the actual memorial itself.
What I could do, Joe, is I could put these are cobblestones, all right? I could certainly put a bump out off to the side here. Once again, it does kind of get into that, and then I need to make it more prominent looking at it.
how about if we have a site visit, where those interested and,
Anywhere in here is fine with me. As long as it's not in the back where no one can see it. I think it's got to be out front here. I don't care.
right out front there, where's it?
Whatever the
gonna fit?
veterans want to do is fine with me.
The back isn't necessarily hidden, all right? There is obviously a lot of
This is
names
here,
on it.
right? This is over here.
The podium is here because after it was drawn, it made sense that the crowd was usually over here or over here. We put the podium here, it didn't work well. The engraving for the original wall is right at the base
Yep.
of this, right? And
I mean, even if something right here at the corner.
But how is he going to insert it? Like, he's talking about putting something inserted in the pavement, right?
No, you can put it on a granite, little short granite post with an angle to it so that people walk up and
Is that something you
see it.
were thinking of, or, because I thought you kind of said you didn't want to do that.
I'd like to keep my concern with, the only concern with that is, I mean, even the lights out get overgrown. So somewhere in the periphery of the, there is a stone wall now also along here that I had to build because of a slope issue that I didn't encounter in the first place, all right? If we engrave into a stone, for example, like that, just a field stone, as it were, which I have no problem with, that certainly could be done. If you put it, those field stones are not quite as subject to being overgrown. You saw the pictures of this 30 years after it was built, 35 years when you saw the bushes. You could no longer see, not that it has to get out of control, but you no longer could see the forest because of the trees. And plain English, it was deteriorating the monument.
Well, how about if we gave you the go-ahead to do the engraving on the granite, and then, do you need to set it all at the same time? That doesn't.
No, because that granite is already set. This, if we do it on a flat piece of granite, you know, that could fit in between the bricks, all right? That's done after the fact. That, you know, matter of fact, that's what the balance of the budget, 52 characters there, and it just about chews up uses up the rest of the budget. This one shouldn't be very expensive, and that certainly can be dealt with.
It doesn't have to be that shape, because you could scrunch, it could be square, make it a little more centered.
I think engraving in the brick would be just a little bit too minor of an impact.
So if it was a new flat stone that was like off in the corner here as you first came in on the ramp,
Yeah.
is it? I mean,
Or center
I agree. I think because then, like what you said, Joe, it's it's visible. It's where you come in on the ramp, but it's far enough away from the memorial that by the time we get past that, we're not interfering with the purpose of the memorial. So I would, I would be more than happy with if it was just a small, piece of granite that if it would stick out because it would be different than the rest of the layout of the brick. You'd see it as soon as you walk in, and pass that down to everyone where it's pointing. But
Right
and then,
here?
hopefully it's not going to deter or just distract from everything else.
I have no.
I like that idea.
I'll run it by the vets and see what they think.
You don't want it to be a tripping hazard other than that.
No, I don't
No,
want
it's
to.
not-
I don't even
it's
want
gonna
to
be
raise.
set in like
I
the
want
rest
it
of 'em.
flat.
No,
but-
it'll be set in the bricks, just
Yeah.
like the rest of
That's
them.
great. You've done a great job. I certainly respect your ability to find a good place for what we're talking about here.
The,
The language is your, we're going to make it too long because I can't pay for it.
right. Well, how about you run it by the VFW and the
I'll run it by some of them.
American Legion, and then come back and we'll have you come at to our next, or one of our next meetings, but otherwise you can start ahead with what you need
Is
to
there
do.
a general consensus that that's where you think we should go?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Yes.
5. That would be a
Well,
unanimous
I have individual
consensus.
thoughts too.
Okay. Well, thank you.
What the hell, I would say, what the hell, I gotta hide it.
We caught ya.
Joe knows
Yeah.
it well.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and so you can just move ahead with your engraving.
The engravings, Lewis Money Company in Marlboro came in just a little bit. They're very close together, so it's all a bit. They did all the engraving on the original. They were engraving 2-inch letters versus 1-inch letters for the same money as another company would do it. So it was like pulling teeth getting that aspect of it put together. What do you think of the verbiage here? Is that something that you feel is appropriate or something you'd like to kick around?
I was wondering,
I can send you something, because I'm working on the one for South Union. As
Okay.
far as, what, I can give you some examples of signage that you might want to do.
Verbiage.
Verbiage.
Yeah, 'cause we would, are we agreed on a block, on a granite block and that's,
If you're comfortable with it, yeah?
yeah, that's, I think I am.
Yeah.
and it may not be an issue if it's a little bit over what's in your, we've used admin money in the past to help
Well, I
with the
think it
signage.
probably should come out
Yeah,
of that.
lighted billboard.
Well,
Yeah.
we put it in as part of it's built
Okay.
into the project.
Yep.
So the only thing and I don't know what you're working on, Joe, but I'd like to see it when you come back with it, is that it's not just the Community Preservation Act, it's the Southborough
Right.
citizens, it's their tax
Yeah,
dollars.
tax
and
dollars at work.
We want to appreciate, I know, more words, but let Joe
Well,
try
we
it
can
around.
help you.
No.
No, but I'm telling you,
We
but
can
the
help you
Southborough
out.
citizens,
We can help you out.
Southborough citizens have paid for it under the Community Preservation Act, but it's not the Community Preservation Act came in and supported it. We like to acknowledge the
Well, funded
value.
is, I think funded is a word that's a pretty use it on you.
Right.
On your, well, like you went to the fire station, it's in process. It was here, this was just you know.
No, it's good.
Just that, it's not, I'm not here to jam anything down anybody's throat, trust me. Those days are long gone.
Yeah, now you're softening up.
50 years.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we let Joe come up with his ideas of what he's working on, and he can bring that to the full committee. The committee can think about it in the meantime. You talk to the VFW and the American Legion folks, and then, but you're, based on the consensus of this group, you're good to go on the engraving. Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah,
Right?
you. It does look great.
Peter, thank you for all you do between that and the cannon, the flagpole. There's
some
certainly
point
a lot of things that my father would be very proud to see.
Well, you know, I
completed,
followed
you know.
a lot, I followed up on a lot of your father's projects that, some didn't pass, but ultimately did. One of your father's proposals to town meeting prior to his death was to replace the flagpole in front of the Pilgrim Church, which was built in the 30s. And one day I was walking by it and I realized that the halyard that holds the flag had actually rotted out, and this is like 6 feet up off the ground, and rotted out of the pole. You didn't have to be a chemist to realize that what was going on at the ground level
Excuse me.
was pretty bad. So we did put a committee together, and the pole was down in front of the town, which is a cell tower, which is more than a lot of money. It's an offshoot of that idea. Yeah, that was your father that originally got a group of guys together with the cannon. I've done it a couple of times since, because it's 100 years old. It's amazing that the wheels are 100 years old. I did a strip them this year, and I brought it back. And to replace some of the spokes, because with the lock bolts, we brought in some critters. They didn't really like that 100-year-old German wood. So, it's, yeah, and like I said, some of the things that Dad started. The precipitous of, what precipitated doing this was, we always had, if you look in the front here, like that.
Yeah, that was.
Like that. That's where we would have our ceremonies twice a year. And I remember Doc Snow tripping over the railing. He was sitting over the dock. And others stumbling to get up. It really was no longer any place. Plus the trees were just absolutely overwhelming it. So that was the trigger that started this project.
Well, it's certainly a job well done, and I don't mean to rush you along, but
No.
we've got somebody
More than happy to
waiting,
be working
so.
on
That was deeply in depth for your work, Peter,
And
thank
we
you.
just so you know, we really thank you. And Andrew will be in touch for our next meeting that,
The engravings in the stone probably because of weather conditions now. And obviously in the ground. Probably won't be completed until Memorial Day next year, but it's part of the contract. It will be done
Okay.
by Memorial Day for this summer.
good,
So that should be good.
thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, so we're moving on to the recreation application for the tennis courts. Is there an extra one down there?
Yeah.
I have some. Do you think?
Here's 10 more.
Just I don't want to write it out.
So Doreen is,
Okay,
back.
so I'm back. Karen and I did some more work on this. Most importantly, we did some changes to the actual wording of the document, the narratives. And then we did some more digging on the actual pricing and got some more quotes. I actually learned that in searching this project, when I was searching it, I was looking for tennis, tennis court companies. But if I opened it up to seal coating, I got more options, which I did not know. So when I did that, we did get another quote just recently. So we have New England Seal Coating that's using an Armor product. He came in at $36,250 with a 1-year warranty. Sports Court New England, which we've had all along. There's 2 different options that Karen and I felt would work for this project. Basically, we're looking at the Guardian Crack product and then the Titanium Track product. One is $68,000, one is $101,000. You got different warranties on those and guarantees. The last one was the East Coast Sealing, which also uses the Armor product. When I received his bid, though, or his quote, he didn't include, that I'm aware of, prevailing wage and any kind of warranty information. And I emailed him and left a message, and I never heard back from him in time for this meeting.
When was that? Like last week, this week?
This week.
Oh.
So, I mean, he got this back from me pretty quick.
Okay.
You know, the turnaround was pretty fast, but I think looking at the price he gave us, I don't think it's including prevailing wage. So, that's, as soon as I get back from him, I'll let you guys know. So when what we started to look at was the actual products, and I did some more research and learned that through the tennis industry that the Armor product doesn't work on cracks that look like spider cracks, which we do have happening mostly in the hearing school. So we're ruling that one. No, Armor product doesn't work on it. I think that's what I said. Armor product doesn't work on spider cracks, so we're ruling that one out. And we'd like to, in the titanium tracks, that one, reading more about it, it's, once you repair the cracks and then you put this layer over the whole surface, if those cracks deteriorate, or if you get another new crack, you end up with dead spots. And you have to peel up the surface again, fix everything, and put it back down. So that could really cost us more money in the long run. So if you guys approve the project, we will be looking to use the Guardian Crack product or something similar, equivalent to. And so when Karen writes up the specs for the project, that's what we'll be asking for. And we'll be putting it out to bid.
So how about if we just go down the line and if anyone has questions for Doreen at this time? Mark?
No questions come to mind right now.
Nice to see 3 quotes.
What?
Nice to see 3 quotes.
Oh. Any other questions or comments on it, Joe?
No.
All set.
All set?
Just quickly, how long do we anticipate this is going to really last? Is this a 5-year fix, or is this a 15-year fix?
We think it'll be 10 to 15 years, somewhere in there. You don't really know for sure because it's such a moving surface, you know?
Okay.
So.
Is this the floating floor surface?
No, not the one we're asking for, it's not.
Okay, so
That would be the titanium, and then there was another one above that was an even
The 188,000.
better project. Yeah, better product, but we're not going with that
so
one.
after the 10 to 15 year lifespan, what happens next?
Then you look at really a complete, I would think,
Rip it up,
rip
repaint
it up, and yeah.
This is built on what Karen had gone over with us at our last meeting, I think, and we had asked to come back with this because we felt for the difference in the time that it was worth. I think the 188 gave you like 15 years, and this gave you 10, and it was like, why wouldn't we go with the 10 for now?
Right.
That's my memory.
I just want to make sure that there aren't any other costs associated with removal of whatever the product is.
What's there now?
So whatever this Guardian Crack product is, after its lifespan is over, will there be any costs involved with removing it? above and beyond what you would normally consider.
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
So it's not like hazard waste?
Or even like, you know, if we were talking about the floating floor product, that would have to be pulled up. Somebody would have to do that.
No, I think with the floating floor product, with the high-end one, you go right over what you've got, pretty much. They clean it up and then you just go right over. It would be part of the cost. It would be in there.
Well, I think we have everything we need for our discussion later.
Doreen, do you know if those are all asphalt, those courts?
I believe they are.
So there's no mix in them whatsoever?
No.
I know that Karen had some of the road repair. There was a company out of, it may have been Holliston. They have a machine that sits on top of the surface and heats it to and gets the tile loosened up, and then they spread it out and they roll it again, and it actually makes new tar. But then, you know, you would have to resurface and everything. I don't know if she looked into that option.
That's one of the other companies I contacted, was the Holliston one, and they didn't get back to me.
Yeah, I can't
But I
either.
did I did send them an email with the specs of what I was looking for, and they wanted to
Yeah,
get
it's
back.
probably not something they do unless it's like a big
A lot of
sinkhole or
the
something.
the seal coating
Yeah.
companies, like tennis courts are kind of like a secondary to them. And the companies I was originally looking at, tennis courts and tracks are their thing. So that's when I opened up the search a little more, and it was helpful to know the seal coating is, companies do that stuff. But they were one that they didn't get back to me. So.
Thank you
Very
Yeah.
much.
Can you come back for a second, Doreen? Who's going to be the liaison to this project? Would be Mark, just to let her know what our votes and everything else, and then moving forward, be in communication with Doreen. That's okay?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doreen. All right, so next agenda item is the business of the Community Preservation Committee. The next meeting date, we had done this by email, we have a January 15th date for January, and then we have a tentative December 18th date. And why I'm saying tentative is, I think that might become more apparent later in our meeting.
You said January 15th, correct?
If that's a Thursday?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Right. So that is our next meeting date, and I think we'll wait for another night to go through normally we set the whole year, we look at, did I send that out? Conservation's schedule has been done, Beth gave it to me, and so we schedule around for at least 6 months, hopefully the year, so that we don't impact Chris's Conservation Commission meeting. All right?
Okay.
So now we're on to annual town meeting preparation. I'm going to pass out the estimated budget. I didn't email these, I just got the numbers from Brian. I don't have one for Betsy. Is that all right?
That's, you know,
So Brian just gave us his estimate for next year. And there's a couple of differences from how we've done it in the past that I'm going to recommend we do this year. So what it is, here's the surcharge. I'm picking 20% state match because last year we went in at, like, I think 25%. And what I found out without that, the bump from the legislature, the 11 million, we wouldn't have hit that amount. So I think 20% is kind of safe to call. We're hoping they'll give us another bump, but until they do, and we don't have anything from the DOR or the coalition because it's not coming out until March. So is everyone comfortable with a 20% match?
Yes.
The 20% is against fiscal year 15, and I got the build-out amount from Brian, so that is based on the 291 on the left-hand side. if you see outside of the box. So you have the 20% match. And then what I took, and I'm adding it into the budget this year, because if we clearly state it, there's no reason not to. The fiscal year 15 state match adjustment, which is that's the difference between what we budgeted last year and what it actually came in at. So there's almost 16,000 there. So instead of doing a separate warrant article for adjustments, I've also done a lot of research. I met with Brian and Heidi to go over the budgeting. I read Department of Revenue guidelines, and you don't have to take any of those adjustments, and actually it's there's documentation that says don't do it. So we weren't wrong in doing it in the past, but you know, the recommendation is not to do it. It just goes in, flows into the general unreserved as it comes in. What we do need to do is next summer or September, when they fill out the CP3, I believe it is, they report, just like we have to report what projects we've spent on to the Department of Revenue, the accounting department and treasurer, they have to report what funds have come in for the surcharge and interest. So we want to track that, get those forms, a copy of it, and start keeping track of it that way instead of doing these adjustments after the fact. So all the money flows into the general unreserved fund. So after you see the total amount we're expecting the budget to be, I put out the 10% and the 5% is required. So what I'm hoping we can do, because I didn't write out the warrant articles, if everyone would be comfortable in approving the budget, then we'll drop the dollar amount into the warrant articles as a placeholder, because I believe they need it the 12th. That way they'll have it, and at our next meeting we can all review it and vote on it exact. But I want to give them a placeholder, and I think that's an okay way of doing it if you're comfortable with it. So what it will be is the budget is up top with the 373 total receipts. We'll put the 10% and the 5 for admin, and then afterwards we have to vote on tonight. We'll have to vote on the Chestnut Hill Farm bond payment. I have $196,100 from Brian, and as always in the past, we took the open space reserves first to fund that, and then the remainder I took it out of this year's receipts, the budgeted reserves. So that will after we take the 10% out and pay for Chestnut Hill Farm bond, that will leave us with about almost $84,000 in the budgeted reserves.
Good.
Is that good with everyone?
Yeah, I was checking it too.
Nice job.
Not that I don't trust you, but I know, I haven't gone through this, I haven't
I appreciate another set of eyes, and so if that's good, what I'm going to do is ask for a vote to approve the budget, and then a second vote to approve the Chestnut Hill Farm bond out of the...
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the budget before us that Freddie put together for fiscal year 2015.
16. All in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me. What was the other one you wanted?
Chestnut Hill Farm bond?
L, and I would like to make a motion that we recommend the town meeting. You want a recommendation for that? Be a warrant article, or you just want that we're going to put it in there?
I think the buckets.
Okay. That we withdraw from
The
the
funding
Chestnut Hill. We
mechanism.
fund it. We fund the Chestnut Hill bond as described. Did you break that? I was doing the math before. Did you break it out? Take it all from open space again?
Yep.
Okay.
See down here?
So break it out. So we take the 37,332.68 from the open space reserve, and the remaining $196,100.
Remaining 158.
Or the 158. Sorry.
Have-
Sorry, Betsy.
You caught whatever Freddie had earlier.
Take the remaining 158, 767 32 from the
Budgeted.
budgeted reserve.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's done. I'll put those into warrant articles, supply town, Vanessa, whoever gets it, and then we can just double check them, because I don't think it has to, it's not going to print. So at our next meeting, we'll finalize that. So now we have,
May I ask a question?
yes,
Do we need to review the minutes?
I'm not going to do that tonight, because we'll do it next meeting. We seem to be pretty packed tonight.
Annual town report, I'm working on it, so that's also due the 12th. Do you want it to be a placeholder and then we go over it at the next meeting? Or do I just distribute it to everyone and read it, get, what would you like to do?
How about if you present it to us? Do you have copies for us tonight?
No.
Okay.
All the numbers.
I think if you email it out and everyone reviews it, and they can give you feedback, it's not something we have to take an action on.
No.
Right, no. I just
So,
make sure
I mean,
Yeah.
so do that. We need to vote on the recreation project, because we need to get that warrant article in if we're going to fund it. Other comments on the project as presented?
So, if I'm reading it right, it's basically a choice of 5 years at X and 10 years at 2X.
No, I think the way I was reading it is there's only one choice. She just gave us quotes for the other things. Am I wrong? The 68,000.
You don't want to use these two products because if they get the spider cracks, and this one she said they didn't want to go with either.
And if you read the front page,
Oh, yeah, no.
there's only one that's at 68,000.
Right.
You should ask her for 62.
Because she's getting 6,000 in contributions. She just wrote that, it should say excludes, so. So she's asking for 62,000. The total cost of the project is 68,000, because they're getting some extra funds.
Includes.
She just
Yeah.
tweaked that a little bit. So the 62 does not include 6,000 for
Right, but we're only
contributions.
given 62.
We're being asked to give 62, but in the past, we've always put a, did you see a contingency in there? I didn't. In case something changes, because you don't want not to be able to do the project. Don't we always put a,
We do want to make it up to $65,000 like we've done.
I think we always done a percentage if someone wants to figure it out. Is it a,
10?
I think we have in the past, 10%. Doesn't mean they spend it if they don't
Right.
have to, but, you know, costs can go up with something you don't anticipate now by the time they can start work on it. So, did we ask her about the timing of when she wanted to start this?
It says summer 2016.
Summer 2016.
So, if summer means June,
July.
I would think the sooner the better.
And she can.
well, let's first decide if we wanted to,
Be $68,200.
Thank you.
68,200 if we're using a 10% contingency.
Yep.
And,
is there a motion?
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the application to the Recreation Commission up to but not exceeding $68,200.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Yeah.
Okay. So then we have to talk about where we're funding it from. We have two options, because Recreation doesn't have a bucket, but we do have the general unreserved, which would be available immediately following town meeting to begin work. And or you can fund it out of the undesignated. Where's my-
Well, it sounds like if we chose the first option, she could do it in the spring and have the courts be usable for the summer. That seems to make the most sense to me.
I'd be in favor of using the general unreserved,
Agreed.
but is there a motion?
Make a motion that we fund we recommend the town meeting that the funding for the Southborough tennis courts rehabilitation be from the general and reserved.
Second.
And just so I'm clear, would that mean immediate access or access after July?
It would mean
After
immediately
town.
following town meeting.
Okay, just want to be clear.
And the consequences, it would be July otherwise, is what you're saying.
That's a wait.
You'd have, otherwise you'd have to wait till July 1st.
Okay.
So, and this would allow,
I think that's a nice point.
all right, so, Joe?
Can we amend the application? Because I think this is a misprint as far as the projects need to be done in warmer weather.
We can go back on
As a
the,
result, we tried to schedule them for the summer 2016. I'm sure that means 15.
we
That's
can
on
ask her to update.
Page 3.
We can ask her to update the application
Yeah.
however we want. I don't think it impacts what we know. We've seen this application since last summer. I think we're pretty comfortable with what's in it.
Been going on for a while.
We would go through it and make any comments for edits that need to be done so that we have a correctly
That's one of
worded
them.
application. So you can send those comments to me and Betsy to make sure they get to Doreen correctly.
Mark's got to take care of that.
To Mark?
Send it to you.
Send them to Mark and Betsy, so Betsy knows. And then we'll have Doreen resubmit an electronic copy for the files. So back to the original motion, which I've forgotten.
It was to fund the Southborough tennis court rehabilitation for the amount of $68,200 from the general and reserve.
Second.
All in favor? So that's unanimous. All right. So now, we need to take a vote to go into executive session.
Mr. Hagley, do you have?
Oh. Thank you for attending,
A few times in my
Jim.
life, I'll keep my mouth shut.
Thank you for attending, Jim.
Thank you, it was a great presentation you gave.
Oh, I thank you.
Very helpful.
I love to hear that, especially when I was so nervous.
Have a good night. Bill Bowman, Chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee.
See you tomorrow.
Just want to make sure you get the email that I sent you relative to Freddie, your advice that CPA funding to affordable housing could be used to fund the affordable housing production plan. And we did vote at our meeting Tuesday night to do so up to $15,000 and use funding that was designated from annual town meeting 2008. So I sent you an email to that effect this afternoon.
I did not see that.
That's coming out of Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
It's coming out of Affordable Housing Trust Fund money.
That was funded by CPC.
That there's a bucket from CPA funding annual town meeting 2008.
I think that needs to be a discussion because you had gotten our letter previously that we were looking to go back to the unused funds, and our understanding was that the Affordable Housing Trust has an account with some prior CPA funds that has not been expended going back many years and over $350,000. I'm not sure what the dollar amount is.
Yep, to try and provide affordable housing wasn't part of what we were looking to do as far as funding the affordable plan. But on your suggestion that CPA money was appropriate, we took the vote to do such.
And yet,
So you're welcome to vote however you like, but we found a use for some of those funds. You may recall at points in time, we requested that the CPA appropriation be put into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, fund, if you will, because we were moving quite aggressively on providing affordable housing at that point in time, and the delay sometimes in getting approval to use those CPA funds caused some problems. And we have not had an active plan recently due to the lack of a quorum from SHOPSI members or with the resignation of the former town planner, who was very helpful in getting us to fund some of these projects. It wasn't a big concern because of the amount of affordable housing that was being established in the community through private funding. We now have a new town planner who is very excited about trying to work for establishing town-financed affordable housing projects, as well as a quorum on SHOPSI. So we're looking at, excuse me, I have a cold, at getting aggressive now at this point with potentially some town-owned properties and trying to, again, build some single-family or possible two-family affordable housing units.
And I just want to explain, because the committee doesn't necessarily know what this conversation is, because I had a request from town planner to use admin money to help fund the Affordable Housing Trust Plan that is going to be expiring, I believe, March 1st, and so that she could start working on it as soon as possible. And I suggested that, seeing as there's so many different buckets of affordable housing funds, that would be the appropriate place, especially where the Affordable Housing Trust could access the money right away. And it's great to hear that they're being proactive now, or you're getting the quorums and people are going to be meeting. I think what I had recommended was that you take it out of the monies you already have, because that also had been funded in the past with CPA money. I'm not sure what you meant by that you had trouble getting CPA money in the past, because for many years the trust fund applied for in our regular application process for funds, went to the regular process to town meeting, the money was approved. Those applications were written so that the town could act quickly when the need arose, and yet to our understanding, not only has SHOPSI not been have a full memberships that could meet because they don't have a quorum. I don't know when the last time the Affordable Housing Trust Fund even met, maybe 2010?
About 2011.
So, as you know from a letter that we said we'd like to have you come in front of us January 15th to discuss the disposition of some funds that had been approved at town meeting but never been utilized, never mind knowing that there are funds that had already been put forth. I'd recommend that, given that letter, that money from those buckets will not be available until our January 15th meeting, and that's not when you wanted to have this plan funded by.
You talked about something you sent a letter out of the blue saying basically that you think you want to take this money back, if I can just cut to the chase on it. And then which I assumed you provided to your board here.
That was a letter from the whole committee that we voted on.
Right, but then you copied me in correspondence to the town planner that CPA funds would be, an appropriate use through SHOPSI to do this, to fund this plan. And, that's something that we're looking to take out of that bucket. Do we have money in our general account through buying and selling houses and fixing them up? Yes, we do. Couldn't tell you probably at this point what was from CPA, what was expended out of CPA previously and came back into the fund from the sale of those houses. So the obvious way to use CPA funds was in those that were approved at previous town meetings for use for affordable housing. So that's what we're looking to do. And I certainly see that as you identified, CPA funds through us would be an appropriate use of the money to do this. So that's what we voted to do. So, I mean, if you want to not allow that, you're welcome to take that vote, and then we'll have to go and re-vote our position, but it was funds, and now we found a use for it, so we're looking to use it.
So wait, just so I'm clear, so this is funds that is already put in the affordable housing
No,
fund?
We
No,
have
this is-
approximately
the money we're looking to take back.
100, I'll throw rough numbers, $186,000 of CPA funds that were approved for use by affordable housing. They have not been used as of this date. It was from annual town meeting 2008, 2010, and 2011, I think. And so those buckets are, supposedly available to Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and we're looking to use money from one of those buckets to fund this plan that's required for you to, deal with Harmon housing. So, because I assumed you all knew this because of the correspondence I received, but the housing plan expires in March, and Jenny realized this and started looking for money. That's when Freddie said ask for possible administration money from you, and was told she could get administration money, CPA administration money out of our bucket.
How much money do you think we're talking about here?
Up to $15,000.
Just so the committee understands the process, the committee knows what the letter that was sent to the Board of Selectmen about the other funds. The request for the admin money was a request that would have come to this committee, but I informed Jenny that I thought we were pretty well already authorized that money elsewhere, so that it was unlikely that we would fund it, especially given the hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in buckets or different accounts out there that haven't been utilized over the years, and that some CPA money had already been transferred to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that would be the best place to take it out of. And this was subsequent and totally unrelated to the letter I had sent about the recouping the old money, because we have been looking at all the accounts, and we asked the Board of Selectmen to come. We had thought tonight's meeting, I believe, originally, but we put it off because we had so many things going on tonight. So that wasn't a communication from me to Jennifer that didn't involve the full board, because we need a meeting to discuss it, and she needed an answer, it seemed, sooner than we were meeting.
And to be fair too, she asked me in one of the planning board meetings about if we could do that through the admin funds too. And when I asked her the amount, I told her, I was like, that would be really difficult based off of, it would use up majority of the admin funds. I said, you can try, but I said that's most of our admin funds. It would be unlikely that the committee would, we'd have to discuss it, but I was kind of in the same.
Additionally, at a prior meeting, we had talked about hiring help for the 5-year plan that we had agreed to move forward with, and if you take that with our other obligations and some new ones that we might be discussing later tonight, there just wasn't any money to do that, especially given hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting out there. So I think the question was, the Board of Selectmen had a letter identifying that we wanted them to come January 15th to discuss the disposition of those funds, and yet went ahead and voted to use money out of those funds.
To me, Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee, not the Board of Selectmen.
Sorry, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee.
Yep.
When there was another bucket of money available to vote to come out of. I just don't understand why that would have been the choice when you had.
Well, because in your correspondence you said, please advise of your intention so that I can react, or basically regarding tonight's meeting.
And I didn't hear anything back to put it on
Yeah.
the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So whether Jenny got to you or not, I sent you an email this afternoon with copy to Jenny and the plan and the finance director. So I responded, wish I got it done sooner. We met Tuesday night, and I thought Jenny was going to let you know of that. But as I say, I certainly think if you identify the use of CPA funding and to let you know December 4th, that's why we use those funds that are sitting out there.
If you want to make a motion,
Make a motion.
So
We've already got the money.
For what?
So, I mean, you know, we notified you, is that something that you need to vote on, that this money was approved for use by affordable housing, but?
we had a prior vote that we wanted all of the projects with monies outstanding that hadn't been accessed in a long time. There was particular concern about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund monies because the application clearly stated to be available to use in a timely manner due to situations that might arise. And our committee felt that not meeting since 2011 sort of indicated that the intent of the application had not been fulfilled, and therefore we were looking to have a discussion, not tonight necessarily, but here we are, on what the best disposition of that fund is, because basically it appears to be a project that was funded that never happened, just like some other projects where nothing ever occurred.
Yeah, money given to Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee is not to fund a project. It's for ongoing ability to try and provide affordable housing in the community. And no one's arguing the fact that Shopsy kind of fell apart. We lost our planner, who was a big spearhead in providing some of these things, and haven't been able to do anything in a couple of years. But the money still seems to have been there for our use. I understand your letter, but the money there for our use to provide this. And as I say, you were the one that pointed her to us.
Why don't we, I think we do need a vote though, because we had a prior vote on having people come in to talk to us before assessing that money.
So did you say that money was frozen?
We did in the letter, pretty
Cease
clear,
and desist, not to
pretty
spend it.
much.
Okay. Well,
No money will be, if you read the warrant articles, they always say the funds are to be spent at,
The affordable housing, to say when the trust fund.
it still has to be, the bill, the funds still have to have the committee's
Approve it.
approval and signature on the,
on each expenditure after it's been,
yes.
okay, so that's why I'm here.
And
Well, that's why I sent you the email. That's
I
why
didn't
I'm
get
asking.
the email.
Okay.
So when do you need when are you looking to have the funds for?
She's looking to bid it right now for a March 25th deadline.
You got mine?
Yeah, no, I get your point.
So,
They have other funds they could have used. They got this letter from us. And, what? If there's a motion,
I guess I'm confused what the motion's going to be.
well, we had already voted not to allow and
He's talking
communicate.
about for March 15th, I think, is that correct?
The deadline for the housing, this just came up last week to our attention.
Right, but so is Jenny looking to have it in place? Like, when do you think the funds are actually going to be taken out?
As soon as she gets, she has to get 3 bids for the project and then award a consultant, so potentially in a week or 2.
They need to know that they have access to the money. They can't put it out to bid if we're not sure if we're going to fund it or not.
Then I make a motion that we approve up to $15,000 from the 2008 annual town meeting warrant article to fund the continuation of the affordable housing plan.
Second.
There's a second, can you wait?
Discussion, I don't think the letter is as restrictive as you might think it was. This isn't the, I don't know where you had it. It's not the final draft, but it was just to notify us, and they're notifying us.
But it's, I mean, my thing is, it's, you know, short notice. Chairperson hasn't received it. It's not on the agenda. We're potentially having another meeting December 18th.
She needs it before then, I believe. I'm just surprised that they didn't take it out of the trust fund there.
Can it wait 2 weeks?
She needs to put it out to bid.
She's looking to put it out to bid. As I say, this was all presented to me, and I followed according to what seemed to be presented from the planner, and then with correspondence from Freddie.
My point was just that
mentioning
CPA money
December.
could be spent on this because in the past, there have been issues we've been alerted to where trust funds have spent money on affordable housing projects that did not meet the requirements of CPA. So that was what that was about, that just the money that had been transferred to the trust fund from CPA, it met the criteria for.
I get that all. That's why we voted to use it.
Are there any other town funds that could fund this project if you didn't use this?
Potentially, we could fund from other money available through Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
How much is in that account?
About 300,000.
Which some of that money is CPC funds also.
That's what my recommendation to Jennifer was, to use that to recommend, ask the selectmen to, ask the housing trust fund.
Here's where I am. Please vote however you think. I'm going by correspondence that was submitted to me by the planner and by the chairman.
I'll go with the recommendation.
Be-
Yours, whatever that might be.
Because, you know, otherwise, if we just used it out of Affordable Housing Trust Fund money, I wouldn't have notified you, and I wouldn't have been here tonight, and I wouldn't have had a reason to notify you, because it was our funds. So hence, my correspondence, our vote, why I'm here.
I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding when I said to notify me, because if they weren't going to use it, we could put it on the agenda to consider it, because it seemed like a pretty big deal that the Affordable Housing Trust, not the Affordable Housing Trust, the Affordable Housing Plan for the town of Southborough is expiring in March, and they need to get the review, to review it, they need to have it in by the end of January. So to hire a consultant and get that done, I think the end of January, mid-February, I was trying to be proactive and make recommendations on how Jennifer could find a way to fund it as soon as possible, given our admin money wasn't available, and being fully aware that there was, the Affordable Housing Trust had hundreds of thousands of dollars that hadn't been used in quite a few years. So, if there's an motion.
There was a motion.
What was it? Could you repeat it? Because Betsy wasn't sitting at the table.
The original motion was that we approve the use of the $15,000 out of the 2008 town meeting warrant article for the Affordable Housing Trust to fund the new, is it Shopsy plan or Affordable Housing plan?
It's the Affordable Housing Progress Plan, or whatever, that's done through Shopsy and the Planning Board.
That was my original motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Opposed?
How did you vote?
In favor.
You were in favor. Okay. So pass, was that pass 4 to 2?
4 to 2.
4 to 2. Okay.
Thank you.
You can submit a bill or an invoice for us to approve. I'll work on That's the one
Fine,
who
you want
signed it
it
off.
from us, or you want it from the planner, or you want it from Brian?
Has to be from the Affordable Housing Trust.
Or from Jenny.
Yep, happy to do it as soon as they get
From the
it.
Affordable Housing Trust, is Jenny on it?
No.
No, she's just ad hoc advisory. As soon
Okay,
as we
we'll
get
put it
it,
together.
she can give it to me and I'll forward it to you, or I'll just ask it to forward it to you under my name.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel about it.
You're going into executive session now.
So, we're going to be taking a vote to go into executive session, so were there any other questions or comments before we do that on our business of tonight? No? Thank you for attending, Sam. What's that, good night, Sam? Oh, Sam and Sam. Then we have to vote to allow that second.
The committee will be entering into an executive session per Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, and not returning to open session. The issue to be discussed is 84 Main Street, Exemption 6, as the chair declares that an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. Is there a motion to head into executive session?
Second?
Second.
Is there a vote?
All in favor?
Aye.